Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leather Supply, and we're going to make a very clean, very professional wallet. Now, we can call it a wallet or a card case, but all told, I think I'm going to use this for my business cards because that is beautiful. Now, it's a simple project. We've just got 2 inside pockets. So if you're new to leather, great project. We're going to pick up some good techniques, but all told, what a great gift idea. All right, anything I use in this video, weaverleathersupply.com or check below. We've got links there, going to take you straight to our website. So let's step over here, look at our pattern. There are 2 things I love about this project. First off, easy pattern to deal with. But secondly, the decoration options, literally unlimited. We'll talk about a few, but sky's the limit there. All right, so digital pick. On our main body, our exterior or face leather, we're going to go 4 1/4 wide by 5 3/4 long. On our pocket, our actual size, and I'll explain that, but our actual size is 1 3/4 by 4 1/4. Now, we're going to overcut this. So therefore, we'll lay this in, we'll trim the size. We don't have to line it up, and it's going to look just like it was die cut. Now, the standard business card, 3 1/2 inches wide. We're going to go a little bit wider here because I know the longer I have this, the more I'm going to stuff in it. So therefore, we're going to give that a little extra width. Now, for our decoration, all kinds of ways we can go. We're going to go with this simple design, and I love this. Descending spots, very clean, very elegant. Now, this is our Pioneer Chrome. Love this, very rustic. But we're going to go with a veg tan. In fact, is that not beautiful? That's going to look good at a business meeting or at the barn. Now, some design options. We could always drop in a basket weave across the face. Or what I'm just dying to do, we're not going to do this for the video. It's just too complicated. But let's do a letter set, drop in a filigree cut, and bring our reptile in behind that. Is that not beautiful? Add a couple of spots. That would really pull that together. Now, with our foil stamp, we can always drop in some initials, or maybe a basket weave, or right there, a basket weave with some spots. Give that a 2-tone dye with a brown stitch. That is beautiful. But again, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to keep it clean. So let's jump over to our main table. We're going to cut some leather. We're going to pull our project from a 4 to 5 ounce Weaver Select. Now, if we're going to stamp or tool, Weaver Select or Herman Oak, absolutely. But if not, we have some great affordable options, a belly and a single shoulder. Great leather, going to make the project look very good. Now, we're going to dye in black, so I'm going to use an ink pen. Black cures all sins, but that's so much easier for me to see. So what I'm going to do is mark out my body, and then for our pockets, I'm simply going to cut 2 bands, 2 inches wide by 5 inches long. That looks good. Okay, we're going to bevel, groove, and slick our throats first. Then we're going to add an English point. We're going to add a thumb grab. But we're going to add that last for the simple reason that if we're not really comfortable with our groover, a bad groove line is going to look worse than no groove line. So let's bevel, groove, and slick one side of both pockets. There we go. That looks good. Now our edger, or our bevel, we're going to use a number 1. This is a 4 to 5, so I'm going to bevel the front and the back. Good. Now, let's slick our edges. I'm going to take a sponge now. I want to hold my leather so that my water is not going to drip across the face. Now, we're going black, so it's not really an issue, but it's a good practice nonetheless. So on our slicker, I'm going to go with this center groove. I'm going to lay this right on the edge of my table. Let's see, there we go. Now, pressure, not the point here. Simply some heat and friction. So I'm going to run back and forth maybe a dozen times. Good. Now, the camera won't pick that up, but that's now rounded, slicked, feels good, looks good. So I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Nice. Those look very good. Last step, let's do this. Let's take our straight edge and let's just put a mark right in the center. There we go. Let's step over to our punch table, drop in an English point. There's all kinds of ways we can get creative just with a pocket. We're going to go with an English point. We can always go with a round, multiple sizes there, or we could cut some creative border. Not to mention, we could decorate the inside pocket. But let's keep it simple for this. I'm going to go with a 1-inch English point, and I'm going to sink this down. I'm going to center it on my mark, and I'm going to sink that down about halfway. Well, that looks good. Very professional. Let's jump back to our main table, work on our main body. First thing we want to do on our main body is we're going to make a mark at 1 3/4 of an inch in on both sides. We'll lay in our pockets, trim our pockets to size. So let's come in 1 3/4. Now that's 1 1/2. So all I've got to do is add 1/4 to that. Let's make 2 marks. Same on the other side. Nice. Let's take some double-sided tape. What we're going to do is we're going to tape these down, chisel, pull these apart, then add our die and our decoration. So let's take some tape, double-sided tape, and we don't need a lot. We just need to stick this down long enough to get our chisel line in. So let's drop that in, and I'm going to drop in some tape on both ends and all 4 sides. And the last piece. Now let's lay in our pockets. We can always come in on that line, drop in a center mark. Whoops, sticking to my straight edge. This is great tape. But let's lay that right in. We can mark both sides or neither. Pretty easy to line that up centered. Nice. Let's flip this over. Now I'm going to actually use the body as my straight edge, but you can always lay in a straight edge if you need to. Very nice. Look at that cut. Again, like I said, it's going to make it look just like it was die cut. Now let's round our corners. If we don't have a round corner tool, it's no problem. I'm going to make 3 easy cuts. There we go. Good round corner. Now, don't want too much corner here because our cards won't sit all the way down in the pocket. Good. Round corners look nice. Hand cut. Now, we're going to use a bridge because when we groove and bevel this, we're going to transition from 2-ply to 1-ply. So if we groove this and we hit that, our groover's going to jump off. So let's drop that piece right under there, just a piece of scrap. Now let's groove all the way around. Now I can move that bridge back and forth, but we're going to use it again. So let's bevel. We're going to edge front and back. Very nice. That is looking good. Let's step back over to our punch table, drop in our chisel line. There are 2 things I'd like to avoid when I chisel my wallet. First off, I prefer not to clip the top of one of my pockets. This is not earth-shattering by any means, but over time that'll create a tab and a weak spot. Secondly, we're going to start at some given point, work our way around. What I prefer not to happen is that I get down to my last chisel and I've got too much or too little for one stitch. That's going to look inconsistent. It's going to stick out. But there's an easy fix for both of these. So let's say right here, what I'm trying to do is come into this. Say this is our project. I started here, worked my way around. But if I drop that in, that's going to be too much distance for a single tine, too little for 2. The point I'm getting at here is a simple fix. Let's mark with our 2 tine. Now let's take our 1 tine. If I need to contract, I can draw this in just a little bit. If I need to expand that stitch, I can push it out a little bit. So let's push that out just a little bit. Now let's come in, mark with our 2. And again, I'm going to stretch that out just a little bit. There we go. So now I've got it to a point where I can drop in my 4 and it's going to be absolutely consistent. That's all we're looking for here. We may be splitting hairs. But again, I'd like to avoid those 2 points. So with this, if I start with my chisel right on the inside of that pocket, then the chances are I'm going to miss the top of every pocket. If I don't, we can always expand or drop or shrink our stitch line. So let's start right there. Good. Now our second 6, and I bet that's going to straddle right across. And it does. That straddles right across the top of our pocket. So we're good. I'm going to work my way around back to our start. Now, when we come down to our corners, what we can do is, again, I'm going to take my 2. I'm going to put my first tine, last hole, and let's just tap that. That gives us a good mark. So now I can come in with my single tine, drop that in. Let's do that again. Good. Now I'm back into a straightaway. The only thing we're doing here is trying to get a very consistent distance between each stitch. And our last 2 chisels. Well, that looks good. Very clean, very consistent, just what we're looking for. Let's jump back over to our main table. We're going to add some dye. If you're new to leather work, a big point here is that dyeing leather doesn't have to be messy, expensive, or time consuming. Now, typically, I will dip dye, but this is a smaller project. We're going to go with one of our dressing sponges. These are great sponges, but also we're going to go with the Pro Dye. It's the only dye I use. So let's start here. Let's take our pockets off. Now, we don't want to pull too hard. We don't want to stretch the leather out, but it is pretty good tape. And our first pocket. So let's do this. Let's make a mark. Now, we can tell which pocket goes on which side, but let's take a Sharpie and put a good mark there. Now we're dyeing with black, but the flesh side is going to be a little bit lighter. We'll have no trouble seeing that spot. Okay, let's start right with our main body. Now I'm going to dye the face or the top grain, the edges, and the back side. Good thick coat, there we go. Now let's set that aside. We're going to give that about 4 hours to dry. In that time, I'm going to clean up, set us up to add our top coat. With our dye, we need good ventilation, always. It's a small project, fumes aren't bad, but nonetheless, rule of thumb, let's have good ventilation when we dye. Now when we jump over to our top coat, not necessarily needed. This actually smells good. And I love the leather balm. It's going to give us a nice low gloss. Before we go there though, let's do this. I've got a rag, and I keep a rag in my shop. It's very lightly oiled, because if we have a lighter dye color, I don't want the oil to get in there and streak. So I keep it in a baggie just to keep that oil from evaporating. We're not really oiling the leather. I want a little bit of oil in there, but what we're going to do is more clean than oil the leather. So let's clean our top grain on all 3 pieces, our edges, and our flesh side. Well, that looks good. In fact, that already looks nice. So now, this is a little bit stiff from our dye. It's not bad. The Pro Dye is great. But let's just soften this a little bit. Now, we don't want to go so far where we actually stretch everything out. But let's just work this with our hands for a minute or two. Look at that. That's already starting to get soft. In fact, it feels just like it did when we before we dyed it. There we go. So we've got that worked out. Feels just like it did before we dyed it. But at the same time, with a little use, this is really going to soften up. In fact, I had that in my pocket for about 20 years. No kidding. Okay, so on our leather balm, let's take 2 rags. So I've got a wet rag I'm going to apply with, and I've got a dry rag. We'll buff. So let's do this. Let's take a little bit of the balm, and let's add this evenly, but a little bit sparingly. Okay, we've got that applied. Let's take our dry rag and let's buff this. Just a short amount of time buffing. Yeah, there we go. Look at that. Boy, is that not professional. So I'm going to do the same thing to the other pieces. Now, we'll do our edges once we get this sewn. But for now, really happy with that outcome. We've got a rich color and a nice gloss. Very cool. Let's take our main body, step over to our punch table, add our decoration. I love spots, and I add these to most of my projects because first off, they're inexpensive. They look great and they're easy to apply. Now, we're going to use 3 sizes here. We've got setters that will set 2 of the sizes, but if by chance we don't have one or most, we're going to use a craft knife to put these in, and it's going to look great. So let's take our pattern. I'm going to drop this on, and I'm simply going to make a mark for each of our spots. There we go. Now, again, this is going to be hard to see, but everything will make sense. So on our largest spot, our 5/16, what I want to do is I'm going to straddle that mark top to bottom. We're going to have cards sliding in and out of this, so I don't want that sideways. And we're going to bend this tine over last so it's pointing down. But what I want to do is let's straddle that center mark and press that in. There we go. Again, the camera's probably not going to see that, but we'll take a look here shortly. Secondly, we're going to go down to our 1/4 inch. We're going to have one of these on either side of our main or that center spot. So let's press those in. Good. Now pressing these a little bit harder, we'll take a look, see if the camera will pick these up. Down to our 3/16, and the same thing. Let's mark those. Those are a little bit smaller, but we can do it. There we are. Okay. Yeah, there we go. So we can see our marks. Now, let's take a little cardboard palette. This is just pieces of cardboard, but this is going to keep us from dinging our blade. So let's take in our blade. Now, I'm right-handed, but I'm going to do my best here. So with this is the longer blade, and we can order these alongside our craft knife. But we've got a pretty good tine here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press my craft knife in. There we go. And I'm going to spin it around and press that in. Basically, I'm trying to mimic the shape of that tine. Let's do that on the other side. Good. Now, one point here. We don't want more hole than tine, but let's press that through. Good, that sits right in there. Now, we want that flush. So let's do this. Let's flip this over, and I'm going to bend these tines inward. But what I want to do, there we go. So our cards are going to slide in from this way. So I want to bend this first tine under. Now let's take the second tine over. There we go. And now let's give this a tap with our mallet. Now I don't want to tap it so hard that we ding it, but there we go. So now, there we are. I can barely feel those two tines, but also the top is bent down, so card's not going to hang up on that. So I'm going to do the same thing with the other spots. Well, that looks fantastic. That's a nice decoration, inexpensive, and easy to apply. Very nice. Let's step over because we're going to sew this together. We are almost there. We're going to go with a saddler stitch. If you're new to leather, it's an easy stitch, but it looks good and it's very strong. So let's start right here. There we go. There's our spot and our spot. Good. So let's drop this in our pony. Now I'm going to clip this piece on. In fact, our tape, that must be good tape because that's still holding. But let's go ahead and drop a clip in here. And I'm just going to leave this clip in there long enough to get about 2, maybe 3 stitches in, because I don't want the clip or the pony to tell me where that pocket is going to land. So on our needles, John James, number 18. That's my favorite hand sewing needle. Now, it's a hand sewing needle, so no sharp point. Our holes are already in the leather. Secondly, on our Ritza, I typically go 0.8 millimeter. Since we're going to go with a smaller project, just to me, my opinion, but proportionally, a smaller thread is going to look better on a smaller project. Now I'm going to go about 4 times my length. That's a little long, but we've dyed this, so we're going to pick up a little black on the front end of our thread. But at the same time, I want to make sure I have enough thread to get around and tie my knot. So let's do this. Let's start right here, about the 2nd or 3rd hole in, because we're going to sew around, and then we'll come down into this pocket and we'll hide our knot right there. So with our saddler stitch, needle on both ends, let's equalize out that thread. Now, from our front, if we think about this, when we chisel, this side is more funnel shaped, so the needle easily finds that hole. But on the back side, that hole's going to pucker a little bit. So it might be a little tough to get that back needle in. But what we'll do is we'll open up that hole. Let's crank that down just enough to where I can see that stitch sink in. But anyway, the point is, so when we go through, let's open that hole up. That way that second needle slides right through. Good. Now we're starting to line up. Let's remove our clip. And I'm going to sew all the way around back to this first hole past my pocket. When we're sewing along our single ply, we don't want to give this too much tension. This could bow up a little bit. But what we can do is take one thread at a time and just pull lengthwise on that. So therefore, that won't bow up. Now as we get to our end, we are going to stop one hole short of where we started. And that is right there. Okay, let's step over to our quartz. We're going to tie our knot and hammer down our stitch line. But all told, that is a gorgeous stitch. Very clean, very consistent. Hand sewing can be a good bit slower than a machine, but all told, this took about 15 minutes at most. So we don't have to have a machine to put in a pretty stitch line. So let's do this. From the inside, our inside thread, I'm going to take this, lift my pocket, and I'm going to come through that next hole, but I'm just going to go to the inside ply. There we go. Let's pull that through. Now, to me, it just seems to be easier to come through the inside first. Now, our outside thread, let's go through that next hole. And there we are. Let that slide through. All right, let's pull both of those down good and snug. Give those good tension. Now, we're going to tie our basic square knot. Let's remove our needles. So I'm going to go right over left. Now I'm going to push my thumb. I've got a little tool here where I've got a cut in the end. So I can force that down in the pouch to tie that knot. But all told, my thumb seems to be best because I can actually feel that tension. There we go. Get my thumb down in there. Good. Now let's go left over right. Circle around. And then let's draw this down in there the same way. Yeah, there we go. I can feel that knot tighten down. Now with our knife, we rarely use this part of our blade. So I'm simply going to lay that right there and I'm going to pull the thread across my blade. Good. So now I'm not worried about splitting any thread. We can always use a mallet. We're going to hammer our stitch line down. Now this is going to do three things. It's going to close down our holes. It's going to spread out our stitch line, and it's going to sink that stitch down into our groove line. We can always use a mallet, but it's nice to have a tack hammer. Well, that looks fantastic. Very professional, very clean. One more step. Let's step over here. Let's slick our edges, and we are done. There's all kinds of ways we can slick our edge. We can go simply with water. I love the gum trag or gum tragacanth, but since we've used the leather balm as our top coat, let's just continue with that. So let's take our rag and we're just going to add a small amount of leather balm to our edges, but let's get those wet and we can actually see that. There we go. Okay, we've got some good wax in there. Now let's just rub that off just so we don't have a matte spot on our top grain. Good, there we go. Now we're going to slick. So our top groove here, that's just right for our 2-ply. And then our middle groove is just right for our 1-ply. Now we can always let this hang off, but really we've got enough body here. So I'm just going to slick from the top. And again, pressure, that's not our point here. And there we go. We can work our corners a little bit. We've got good corners to start with. But when we select those, very nice. You know what? That is one beautiful project. Let's see how a card fits in there. Oh, very nice. So if we're new to leather, we've picked up some great basics. Cutting, dyeing, sewing, adding spots, working our edges. But for those of us more seasoned, what a beautiful, clean, simple design. A wallet or a card case. It's not really one of those projects where we really think about all the design and decoration possibilities. Sky literally is the limit, but I love this, very happy with it. Now, one thing I like about this, it's simple. Some cards, some ID, little cash in the middle, slides right in my pocket. Very comfortable, but at the same time, what a great gift idea for family, friends, co-workers. Yeah, You'll be a champ when you pass a few of these out. I hope this is good information for you, and I hope every card wallet you make is spot on beautiful. Good luck with your projects.